Jürgen Tobler on automation of normative processes, and then Christian Stagater of the Links Initiative, and then Jörn Erpgut, who will be talking about blockchain and the GDPR. But before we let them do their presentations, I want to turn it over to Professor Erich Schweighofer, who's really the initiator and founder of this conference, and one of the leading legal informatics scholars in the world. So, Eric, are you there?
Thank you very much. Welcome, and thank you for this opportunity that we can present our interesting applications here. IRIS conference is a big conference for Central European standards, about 250, 300 participants, and we're in the 32nd year. And this year's topic is Internet of Things, and also quite strong is data protection and also legal tech as such. And we see also a bit of trend. There's a very strong awareness now for legal tech, also for Internet of Things, and all people are speaking about what we can do with that, what are the legal implications. And therefore the conference is very interesting, and we have many speeches giving us some outline how it will develop. So we're a bit crazy now, legal tech, maybe a bit late than in the US. Governments are preparing all kinds of papers, projects, initiatives. So we would like to catch up, and maybe this is one small opportunity also to do it. And therefore, for us, for this platform, as we call it, we're quite open. So quite many can speak, about 130. So we see, and it gives people the possibility to speak, but also then to develop the ideas in competition with others as such. That's what I like to say about the IRIS conference, and also thanks for this cooperation. And I will hand over to
Thank you, Eric. We lost the video stream. We first had a short video image from you guys. Oh, there you are. Okay. There you are. Okay, thank you.
Good. Then I will hand over to the first presentation to Blaise Devaux.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, Blaise. How are you? Now we don't hear you. What happened now? Can you hear us? There's no audio.
I can hear you.
Oh, now we can hear you. Okay, yes.
Okay, great. Great. So I'm very happy to be with you today, and I would like to talk to you about the automation of the lawmaking process. And I'm from the company Weblaw, and with me is Wolfgang Hugentobler from the ID Park company. And with automation, we mean document automation, because we think that document automation is not only for the mass production of consumer contracts, you can also use it to improve the lawmaking process. Because this is a very complex process, and it is a real challenge to keep a complex legislation system coherent over time. So we see a lot of potential for automation in 4 major steps of the lawmaking process: in the drafting part, where you have document models that are ready to use; in the managing part, when you can integrate the whole process in the entire workflow; in the publishing part, where you can publish your laws to a multi-channel environment; and the most important part is the amending process, where you can let the system handle all the complex change management, and you can concentrate simply on changing the part of laws that you need. And today we would like to show you a software that we developed, DocGenie for Lex. It's made by the ID Park company. It's a document automation software applied to lawmaking process, and we already have it live in the city of Bern, Switzerland, and we will soon have it also in a Swiss canton and in a Swiss university. And now I would like to hand over to Wolfgang, who will show you how the software works.
Thank you, Blaise. And welcome to.
I think, Blaise, you may
have to share
your slides now.
Yeah, Blaise, you have to unshare. So I'm gonna do a live demonstration. So I won't be using any slides. Here you see this, the system. It's a cloud-based system, and my company is 15 years old. We have applied the principles of component-based authoring to the discipline of lawmaking. That's not the only discipline that we are dealing with, but it's we figured that's the best, quite a strong case for applying component-based authoring. Here you can browse through the system, of course. That's what you can expect. It's responsive. You have you can scroll through the system. That's what you expect. The most important thing is what Blaise has mentioned is changing the system, changing a bill. For that, you have to have certain rights to open a folder where you can start a new law. For instance, here, let's call it I'm working in a kind of a template where I can only work within these blue fields. These are the components. I cannot work in the white area because that's off limits. So that helps the author to stay within the defined boundaries of making a law. For instance, if you add a new article, you can only do that by selecting an existing article and add an article, or moving around, or add some title. You simply cannot do something wrong. You always stay within the boundaries that you have declared in your environment. For instance, if you have only one paragraph, there shouldn't be a number. But if you add another paragraph, the system adds automatically the ordinal numbers for keeping the references stable. You cannot change that number. The system is making sure you have at any time the right number. We will see that later when we change an existing law. If you are creating a new law, then it's simple. It's simply a collection. You can move them around just as you like. You can change, for instance, the entity issuing the law. Now we have plural, or let's take the, I'm sorry, it's all in German and not in English. That's gonna be applied to the system for the university. Now, you can make sure that things like the president, are gonna change it to female, then automatically the article is applied as well. So you can define rules dependent on the data that you are entering. So far, so good. We have, we can forward the law. We can give it a a number, a dossier number, if that is necessary. We can always have a look at the protocol. That's where the changes, in this case, the new law is being documented. That is going to be published by when and who is signing that. I can, while I type, I can watch. That's automation at your fingertips. You see anything that you enter is may be projected into some other panel, into some other document. It's going to be interesting once let's publish that. Okay, certainly have to make sure you have a new number. Now that's made public. I could do that into the future. I have in the chronological system, I can see sort of a protocol, or I will have, that's the new law. I can't change that, even though I'm logged on. If I want to change an existing law, I have to open again a dossier. Let's do that. Let's give it a name. That's maybe better. It's everything. The order of yes.
Question. So what is the advantage of using this kind of document automation approach to publishing laws over just you know, creating a PDF and put it out?
Yep. Yeah, that's probably going to make it clear when I'm about to change a law, because what you have to make sure, changing existing an act of law that has been published, you have to make sure that you keep track of the changes. You have the obligation to make public what you have been changing, and that's quite cumbersome and tedious. Let's see, I change that, give it a title here. By doing that, I not only have to, my primarily task is to write the right text, give it the right title without typos. That's my primarily task, and the system is taking care of all the footnotes. Let's see.
Are you doing anything so that you know, that particular law, you know, executable or interfaceable by other systems that might kind of refer to the law or might have to implement some parts of the law? Does your approach enable some of that?
Yeah, you can, for instance, you can reference other laws, other collections. Like here, I want to add a, let's see, I've used the wrong, like the Bundesverfassung from a higher. Now I have a reference to an external. That's the external, an external act of law. That's certainly possible. But let me see if I add a new article, and I have already a Article 3. I cannot create an I can't simply change the numbering. The system is taking care of that new number relative to the last version. And again, I simply type, or I delete something. So I move that, change something, and the system is automatically creating all the footnotes that I'm required to do. And while I'm doing that, I can observe all the changes that will be made public. I don't have to write two documents. I'm writing here the new bill, and here it is tracked. All the changes relative to the last version of the bill are being tracked, and that is going to be published as well. Or I have a list. That's another projections. I can take something back like that, and it's automatically everywhere applied. I have a synopsis. If let's uncouple that as well. And let's delete something. I don't actually delete. It's simply marked on the timeline that this piece of text has been deleted. Now I'm going to quickly publish that change, and then you'll see something interesting. If I'm going to look now in the system where everybody's browsing, I see my changes being applied, and I have the timeline up here. If I click on the last version, I'm not exchanging the whole document. The system is changing the components being changed relative to on the timeline. So you can observe here that article is new. If I go back in the timeline, it's gone, and now it's here again. Let's do that a second time and do some changes in the future. I take the same bill again, and let's change something different, or let's change what we have.
Wolfgang, I just want to make sure we have enough time for the other presentations too. Because but I have is the Swiss lawmakers already using your system?
Yes, the city of Bern and a canton is in the process of is going live in about in April, and then a Swiss university in shortly after that.
What's the university gonna use it for? What kind of?
For the all the internal
policies and
the policies that have to be changed every year for all the curriculums, all the in two languages, German and English, and they have a real battlefield in keeping track with all the changes. And with our system, they simply focus on the changes. Let's see, I've made another change. Just one last thing. New bill should now change to, I have a new change made in the future, or I go back, and the system is managing all these changes on the timeline. And you don't have to worry about all the footnotes at the bottom. Everything is linked. Yep. So that was a quick tour.
Super. Thank you. Any questions for Wolfgang or Blaise? From the group or anyone online? If you're online, you can unmute yourself, or you can just use the chat function to ask your question. There's a question right here. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the presentation.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'll move it over to you.
Thank you for the great presentation. I'm a PhD researcher in Europe, in Belgium, and I work with the EU. And I was wondering, to what extent have you tried to get this to the EU, and also what is the reaction of local versus national governments to such a platform? Because it can be very useful, but I'm not sure how conservative lawmakers are in terms of technology and their job. So I'm just wondering how that goes from a practical point of view.
Well, one of for the EU, it would be the great advantage would be the multi-language possibilities, because the system has primarily internally a structure for every language, the same structure, so you can enforce the compliance across all languages. The reactions, what we have figured out is, in comparison to other systems, there is still quite a you have to convince the lawmakers that it makes sense to work with components and not with templates, not with whole documents, that you can actually work in applying changes to components. That's a totally new way of dealing with laws, but I believe it's best suited exactly for these type of documents.
Great. Any other questions? Anyone? Any chat? Anyone asking a question? No. All right. Well then, thank you so much, Wolfgang and Blaise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to have you. And next up, we'll have Christian, who will be speaking about the Links initiative. Christian, are you there? There you go. We can see your slide. We cannot see you yet, or hear you. I think you're on mute.
Our system says that the host has stopped our video, right? Okay, so we start it again. Great.
Okay.
Christian.
Hi.
Hey, Christian. How
Hello.
are you?
Fine. And you?
Very good, very good. Take it away.
Yeah, I want to present you the Lynx system, which is currently in the development. Lynx is an Horizon 2020 project, which is funded by the European Union. And we are currently 11 partners working on this research project. And I want to give you a little bit overview about us. So we are spread over whole Europe. So we have partners from Spain, Germany, Netherlands, Latvia, Italy, even from Israel and from Austria. So as you can see, we have partners in different areas. We have for example, the German Institute for Artificial Intelligence, which for mainly AI. DNVGL is an industry partner. Curate Casa is also an industry partner. It's a law agency. We have several universities in Spain. K-Dictionary, as the name already is saying, they're having multilingual dictionaries. And we have Tilde for automatic machine translations. And yeah, Semantic Web is a strong partner for, as the name already is mentioning, for semantics. And OpenLaws, as this is my company, where I'm working for.
You also have a law firm as you're on that list, I saw.
Curate Casas is a law firm.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Go ahead, please.
Okay. What is the background the project is built on? When a European SME wants to go to another country, it has several barriers to go there. Because in Europe, we have the different languages, we have different laws on different layers. So it's not so easy to get the knowledge what happens if I go with my company now from Austria to Italy, because I have a language barrier. I have to speak Italian, otherwise I cannot read the legislation there. Another idea issue is that maybe there are some legislation I'm not aware, because they are only familiar in Italy, and I haven't heard about them in Austria, because this kind of legislation does not exist at all in Austria. So this is the background. So we have to implement with different standards, with ISO, ENOR, DIN, for example, for Germany, having to follow different sector-specific practices. And for this reason, our idea is that we create an ecosystem as a cloud service where we integrate a lot of information in a legal knowledge graph, and build on top of this legal knowledge graph a lot of smart services other can use then to build application on top of it. So to see this on a more high level, it's like, okay, we have different legal resources from the different countries, from a European point of view, and even from the national levels. We have language resources we want to put into the system. We have standards, even private documents and other open data, for example, company data and so on. And all this information should be loaded to a legal knowledge graph, where we build vocabulary, linked data, and even index documents. And to work with, we have different smart services. Here, only a high-level overview. What we can have is, for example, semantic annotations, recommendations, linking of documents, so the automatic linking of different legal resources, but even with private documents, summarizations, translations. So, example, then that Italian or Spanish legislation will also be translated to German or English. Search functionality in different dimensions, information extractions, Q&A services, and so on. To use these services, you will have the possibility to define workflows, so that you can define a workflow which allows you to first, for example, load a document to the system, then make semantic annotations, linking, a summarization and a translation, and giving back the result. To prove this envisioned solution, we have 3 pilot cases. There's one pilot for contracts, where we as Open Laws are responsible. There is the pilot for geothermal, which is done by DNVGL, and the pilot for labor law is done by the law firm Kurata Casa. So to pilot contract, a short high-level overview. So we want to process contracts, and contracts processing is normally costs and timely.
What does contract processing mean?
Contract processing means even that you, for example, get a contract that is currently it's in a written form, and you have only a scan, maybe an OCR scan from it, and now you want to have more information. You want to have the meaning of this contract out of it. So the question is how to process contracts in a fast and efficient manner. What clauses are sensitive for changes of legislation? So you may have clauses in your contract which references to legislation and so on, and you want to be aware when there's a change in the legislation or in the case law, that you get notice that you may have to look on your contract. Are there any decisions which impacts your contracts? And in a multilingual environment. For example, if you are a company which has offices in different countries, you may also interested what is in this contract, even if you don't speak the language of the affiliate of this country. So the envisioned use case for contract management is like, so you have a contract which is a PDF file, which is OCR'd in a high quality, and then you will extract information. And this is done by annotations, information extractions, and so on. And you getting back an enhanced PDF file, for example, and the metadata back, which you can then use in your system. A workflow, for example, for contract management can be like, here you have an input, you have structure extraction, named entity recognition, time extraction, geo extraction, entity extraction, and so on. And finally, you get an output that you again have a metadata now of your contract, which you can now use in other systems, and you have more meaningful papers, I would say. The second
What's the use case there in this sort of cross-national example you gave before? I mean, I understood the example of creating some kind of an Q&A application where people can more easily query the law in different countries, but what's sort of like the specific use case with contracts?
Yeah, here it is the use case here is that you have first that you get the different contracts. For example, if you're a bigger company and you want to have an overview of all your contracts, so you get it in a more meaningful, and even contracts which are from your affiliates, which are in a different language. So you get a summary which is in English, and you are able to read.
Oh, this is the company in turn for its own contracts to analyze its own corpus of contracts, pretty much.
Yep.
Okay.
So the other use case is the use case of DNVGL. It's in the geothermal industry. And there they have the issue that currently for geothermal, there is not a lot of legislation, but there is some areas and standards which are quite common and technical standards. And they are in another area, mainly in oil and gas. So they want to get cross-references from what technical standards and given practices can be taken over from the oil and gas industry to the geothermal industry. And the third pilot is for labor law, and their question should be answered like, if I'm sending employees from Spain to Germany, are there any new guidelines, norms I have to follow? Is there something I wasn't aware about, what the equivalent norms? So for some kind of norms, I'm aware that they should exist also in Germany, but there may be other norms which are only existing in Germany, but there's no equivalent in Spain. So this is most likely much harder to find out because you are not aware that there is something existing. Okay, that's any questions?
Anyone? Yes.
So I have a question about one of the use cases on the website, which is about GDPR compliance.
You are very silent.
Okay, we'll move the computer over to you. Sorry, we have audio.
So I just had a question about one of the use cases on your website, which was around GDPR compliance.
Yeah.
And specifically kind of helping companies and in particular SMEs keep their documents up to date. So, you know, whether that's contracts with users, data controllers. And I think one of the things you were talking about was kind of connecting those contracts to regulatory changes and kind of automating the process of updating the contract. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about that, because that seemed really interesting and compelling to me.
Sorry, can you repeat it? It was quite hard to understand.
Yeah, wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the GDPR use case.
Yeah.
And specifically automating updates to contracts.
Yeah, the idea is that you find out what paragraphs are in the contracts are. Not that easy to update contracts in Europe.
Oh, perfect.
No, it's not regarding updating. It's more regarding finding this information. So it's we don't want to update anything. We want to find that there is a conflict. How to solve this conflict then with your client or partner is another area which is not our target of this project.
So I think Jörg is going to talk more about GDPR issues specifically.
Yeah.
Right, but are there any more questions for Christian? Yeah, there's one more.
You linked up the thermal energy to geo.
Christian, can you hear us? I think it's Christian. Can you hear? Christian,
yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
One question for you.
You were linking geothermal energy to gas and oil sector.
Yeah.
Are you planning to link it to other forms of industry standards like, electronics or let's say nuclear energy, or like, is it this the geothermal is the bigger market right now? Or?
So for this geothermal use case, DNVGL has a lot of industry standards and best practices. So they have already a lot of information, which is currently mainly for oil and gas. And they want to extract this information so that even if there is some information, if they are going now to the geothermal industry, they find out what is related for a geothermal project and what is not related for the geothermal project. Because, for example, if you go make drilling for oil and gas, you have other environmental law than if you do drilling for geothermal, because the one times you only drill for water and the other times you are drilling for oil. So there are differences, and this is the idea to get it out.
We have also a question from this room here. Maybe do it. Yeah. Hi. Can you change the charts 3 or 4 times to the front, please, so we can take a look? So you mentioned something like annotation. So here, yeah. So how does this work? How does annotation work? You take the contracts of a law firm, for example, so you have to annotate the texts of the contracts, for example. How does this work?
Yeah. So here I have to say I'm not the expert now for annotation. Because this is our other partners in this project, so they are more the partners. But it's mainly with an NLP technology. We've defined thesaurus, so we have and yeah, some training, some models that they are trained for it. So the models for these annotations are trained for specific use cases. So finally it should be full automatic, but let's see how the quality will be. I have to be realistic here. Okay.
Okay, appreciate your sincerity. Great. Well, did anyone ask a question online?
Daniel Gutierrez is just typing a comment saying he's interested in collaborating. So we always encourage presenters to type their email address into chat so our audience can be in touch. So if you want to take a moment to do that when you're done, that would be great.
Just put your contact information into the
Into
chat.
the chat window on the Zoom web conference.
Yeah.
And maybe Wolfgang and Blaise could do that too, our previous speakers.
Wolfgang and Blaise can do it. That would be great.
Okay, and then Anya wrote a question. She said, if there are projects that are currently exploring legal frameworks in the energy field, are there possibilities to implement your solution? We would be interested in this as well. Company is incorporated in Slovenia, implementing solar panel solutions in Italy, Germany, Latin America, and Asia.
Yeah.
Also looking into Africa. She put her email address into the chat. So it might
Yeah,
be
we will do.
Super.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. If there are large transactions to follow from this, we would like 10% share, please, of introduction. All right.
There are a lot of people already who want to have the shares also here.
Okay, great. Let's all throw them into a pool and
Okay.
we'll allot them somehow. All right, great. So, okay, I see deal. Okay, super. Great. All right, well, thank you so much, Christian. It's great to have you. We'll turn it over to Jörg now, who's gonna talk about the GDRP.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well, I've got a legal background and a computer science background, and I'm into GDPR and blockchain. And this is a nice topic because there's not so much certainty around. And this means that we can do a lot of discussion, and there is a lot of things to develop. But of course, you need to have some guidance. And my idea was, why not offer some quick check guidance on GDPR and blockchain? So I've built a little quick check tool. You see it's version 0.3, so it's not a finished project yet, it's a prototype. And here you got some resources. But if you don't want to read resources, but rather prefer a questionnaire, you can start this check tool, and you will be asked questions. And the idea is not to provide you with legal security. This does not exist yet. But it's clearly there are things you should do and things you shouldn't do. And this kind of guidance is offered by this tool. So of course, first you read the privacy policy. And I use the framework which is hosted in the US, so I do need consent for that. And of course, if you use if you're a lawyer and you use client information there, you shouldn't put any client information there. So the questionnaire starts with some general questions like what reasons justify the use of blockchain technology? And you see there is this hype reason you want to use blockchain as a database, decentralization, and but there are some cases where you can use blockchain in order to provide better privacy, because you cut out the middleman, you cut out the intermediary, you foster the self-determination of data subjects. So I'm into this kind of use case. So I go on, and the system will present me more questions. Somehow this system here is a bit slow. So what kind of blockchain do I want to use? Well, I don't like purely private blockchains. I know how to use databases, so I'm going for a public blockchain. And then the system is asking further questions, going further into detail. First question then, of course, is, will GDPR apply? And I'm living in Geneva. Switzerland is not part of the EU, but when you do blockchain projects, the GDPR often applies. If there is some entity, some processor, some controller in the EU, or if you address, for example, people in the EU, if you're offering goods or services to them. So I tick a box there, and the system then knows, of course, that I have to apply GDPR. And well, if you use your computer, it's going to be faster. This is the presentation computer. Do you plan to create a new blockchain? No, I don't. And do you process data on the blockchain which can be identified with natural persons? So this is the definition of personal data, which is, by the way, much broader than PII in the US. So I say I'm processing personal data, but I use privacy enhancing technology like cryptography. Then the system will ask me what kind of cryptography I'm going to use. And I say I use cryptographic hashing, for example. Of course, you can tick the other options as well. And then it asks me, how do you apply the hashing? Do you do it in the right way, wrong way? It really depends how you apply hashing, if the hashes of personal data will still be personal data or not. And this is something you don't find in the law, because often legal people see hashing and then they say, well, there has been an opinion that hashing is not complete anonymization, and they don't take a look at the specific use case. But you do have to do that, and this questionnaire will help you to do that. So, well, do you do anything to delete data on the blockchain? Of course, you cannot delete data on the blockchain, but, for example, the blockchain contains only hashes. Once the original data off-chain is deleted, they are useless. So I tick this box, for example. And then the system will go on with further questions. What kind of justification do I have? For example, is there a legal obligation? Is there a contract? Or is there consent? I'm ticking consent to show you that the system will tell me that this is not a good idea, because consent is weak. Consent can always be withdrawn. And what do you do if a data subject withdraws consent and you have written the data on the blockchain where it's immutable? So I'm pretty much at the end of the questionnaire, and then I'm getting the evaluation. It tells me the weak points. For example, here justification. You rely on consent as a justification. However, consent can always be withdrawn. It's currently being debated if switching from consent to another justification, like legal requirement, is possible or not. Usually you have to stick your justification. You can't say, well, if this doesn't hold, then I take the other one. This usually doesn't work. So we recommend to use consent only for the processing of data where data can be deleted and where no other justification is available, because it's really the weakest justification available, and you should try to use the other justifications that are stronger and more permanent. At the end, you can ask further questions, and you have a contact form where you, of course, can leave your coordinates so I can contact you. So it's not rocket science concerning this form. It's quite a simple form, but it shows that there is a need for clarification, and the common legal literature doesn't address this. Because you're in legal terms, and you need to really address the technical details to see whether you can achieve GDPR compliance and how you should build your system. Because when you look at GDPR and blockchain, you have to do it right from the start because you have no second chance to correct it. If you have a conventional system, you build it maybe a little bit wrong and then you change the rights. The admin can always change rights. This is not good, but it's always kind of possible. When you put data on a public blockchain, it's there and you can't say, well, give it another try, I just change the data. It's not possible anymore. And this is the real risk associated with blockchain, that you have no second chance when you commit an error. Otherwise, I think there are lots of ways to cope with blockchain and GDPR. It's not really easy to do because the GDPR is not technology neutral. People are telling you that, but it's not true. GDPR has an image of certain architecture of control in computer systems. So you have the controller, you have the processor, you have the data subject. If this hierarchy doesn't exist, GDPR has problem working. So if you have peer-to-peer technology, you have the controllers, which are regulated by GDPR, and the data subjects, which are protected by GDPR and attributed some special rights. But if those are the same persons, GDPR might even work against the data subjects because controllers are required to identify themselves and data subjects have a right to privacy. So you might, depending on the interpretation, end up with somebody telling you that in the name of GDPR, you're losing your privacy, which is, of course, not the result you want to end up. So there are some cornerstones where GDPR and peer-to-peer technology really don't work nicely together, but there are at least a lot of scenarios. I can name you 5 scenarios where it does work. And I talked with data protection authorities and they, at least in principle, tend to agree. So that's my presentation. I'm looking forward to your questions.
You have a question, Mike? Did you have a question, Mike? Anyone else have a question?
Online had a question. So Anja had written, aren't private
Blockchains?
ECF blockchain databases anyways?
I didn't completely understand.
Aren't private blockchains databases anyways?
And then actually they go on to say, can you name some of the direct cases where the GDPR lowers our privacy via blockchain?
Well, first, private blockchains, well, there are a lot of people that name blockchains databases anyway. I don't agree. Of course, they have similarities that they store data, but a database is more than just storing data. And but if you have a private blockchain, it resembles much like a database, but like a very bad database, very slow one, and one that you wouldn't use at all because it's slow. It doesn't. It cannot store a lot of data. It's just the worst database design that you could imagine. Some people say permissioned or private databases are a solution concerning GDPR. They are not, because GDPR requires on a regular basis to delete data. Of course, when you control a private or permissioned blockchain, you can actually force hard forks on the system. That's possible. But if you do that on a regular basis, you lose all trust that you might have in this permission blockchain. So it doesn't make any sense. So if you want to have regular deletes, use a database. except when you have some special design. You could, for example, have a design where you use chameleon hashes and have specific data that you want to delete after a certain time, of course, which you cannot trust in there, but the rest of data you can trust in. Or you could have a blockchain where you say, well, I will store everything for 10 years because accounting rules require me to store data or any transaction for 10 years, but then the information is thrown away. You could build this kind of blockchain. Of course, then the trust is limited to 10 years, but that's exactly what you want. The real issue is that with blockchains, you have to decide first and then build the system, because you intentionally remove the possibility to change the system later. So you have to choose an architecture, a design, and then you have to stick to it.
Jörg, I have another question. So the form you created is, has basically makes a legal decision, which is whether the GDPR applies in a specific case or whether it doesn't. And how, is that sort of based on your analysis of the GDPR, or is there some case law already, or other interpretations of the law that you have integrated?
Well, the system does not make a legal decision. It addresses critical points. So it tells you where a solution might not be optimal, where you might run a certain risk. It doesn't tell you everything is fine, because, well, if you seriously do blockchain GDPR consultancy, there is no legal certainty that enables you to tell anybody that everything is fine with the blockchain design. So there is a certain legal uncertainty. But what are the basis? When you take a look at the original on my website where you start the tool, you see a lot of links, and the links are basically from the Working Party 29, from the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, from the Austrian Datenschutzbehörde, some opinions, and we discussed it at the European Union Blockchain Observatory and Forum, where there has been a document published, and so on and so on. So there are sources. There is not a lot of case law about blockchain and GDPR. Well, there's not a lot of case law about GDPR, and there is basically none about blockchain. And of course, you can use other decisions and apply it to blockchain. Of course, this is possible, but there remains a lot of legal uncertainty, as with GDPR as a whole, but for blockchain, it's even a bit more than for other subjects.
Steve has go ahead.
Sorry, you were actually ahead. Go ahead.
So I wanted to know, like, if lawmakers change GDPR, then all of the existing systems around blockchain, what will happen to them?
Can you repeat?
So as you said that, 1 second. So as you said that, that everything has to be done correctly for GDPR and blockchain since the beginning. And now what happens if the lawmaker changes GDPR or a minor, article in GDPR? Then the existing systems will face some challenge because they will have a potential to be invalidated against GDPR.
Sorry, can you still repeat?
So if GDPR is amended, then what happens? Yeah. if GDPR is amended and then these existing blockchain systems.
Well, of course, there's discussion about changing, amending GDPR. There's discussion about changing, amending blockchain to make it GDPR compliant. And but I think when you look at the purpose of GDPR, the purpose is to enhance privacy, and decentralized systems are really a way to get rid of the middleman, get rid of this big intermediaries. And the big intermediaries are one of the biggest threats to privacy. And if you can do that, and if you use privacy enhancing technology, then you can achieve a good and even sometimes a better privacy than you can achieve with conventional systems. And it would be very contradictory if GDPR prevents this kind of use case. Of course, if you have a use case where you use blockchain just as a database where you store personal information, then you're in trouble because you can't correct it and you're violating GDPR, and there's no reason why you should change the law to allow this.
All right, Steve.
Did I answer your question? I didn't completely understand it.
I think, did you
I just have a really quick comment. I'm glad this system exists because I also see Michelle Fink's name. She's an editor for our academic journal on blockchain. Good to see that. I'm glad the system exists because it seems nuanced. I agree that it's a very gray area. There are going to be battles in the future, but first of all, it's helpful for a lot of enterprises to understand what is just unconditionally against the grain of GDPR. That's helpful. Everything else is gray anyway. There will be battles fought, but it depends on the use case. So I think this is a good start, and any guidance at this point is helpful because it's a lot of these enterprises, they don't really have legal in-house counsel and so forth to kind of piece this all together. So I think this will, again, just like SAFs, just like a lot of the legal mechanisms that lawyers are coming with today, they might not hold water in the future, but you have to try in the first place, right? So I think this is a good start. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Jörg, thank you so much. We're pretty much over our time already, but thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you to all the other presenters too.
If you could type your email into chat, that would be great.
Yes, I email you the URL. I put it in the chat. Where's the chat?
Yes, please put it into the chat.
Yeah.
And to all of you, and Eric again for coordinating this exchange, this transatlantic exchange. It's been super interesting to hear what the IRIS participants are working on this year, and yeah, we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you, Eric. Did you want to say a few words?
Yes, just thank you very much for this cooperation. It's a great opportunity for our participants to see and present what's happening here, and also get your very valuable comments. So we like to continue that and hope for a good cooperation in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And best greetings to California. Have a nice afternoon. We have a nice evening here. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Bye.